Welcome to Essential Coaching Conversations with Kyle and Asim.
The real, relevant, necessary conversations to help you navigate coaching, teaching, learning, and life.
Welcome in, coaches. We're back after a banger of an episode last time with Becky Carlson, the fearless coach. Maybe this one might be just a little bit less entertaining. I don't know. It's just the two of us. Hopefully the listeners listen all the way through, because based on the stats that we have seen from the last episode, first of all, amazing turnout of listeners. We have a lot of new listeners as of last week, which is incredible. And the median runtime was an hour and 7 minutes and 43 seconds or something like that, which the whole episode was like 107.54. So I don't think they just listened to the music at the end. Like, I think that's all it was like, they're like, oh, the music started, great, we're done. But the median runtime was the entirety of the talking part of the episode, which is actually really incredible.
Pretty solid.
Yeah, pretty solid. So thank you all, to our new listeners, to our longtime listeners, to our loyal listeners. We really appreciate everybody sharing that pod far and wide. Hopefully it added some value for you as a coach, as a teacher, police officer, whatever it is. And I think today is going to be a little bit of a continuation, maybe, of that, perhaps a different viewpoint. As you can see from the title, it's all about whether adults matter or not, and kind of the overall aggregate result of the adultification of youth and high school and college sport. But Kyle, as it is episode 22 of season 2, we need to start with an athlete. What you got?
So, Kip, if you're listening, I'm not going with the most obvious one in our minds, with Emmett. But I'm actually going to go. I think it's been a minute since I've kind of done a tech tie here. So 22, my mind goes to our new, just finished up her freshman season point guard at Louisiana Tech with my Lady Texters, Gianna Morris, out of Sherwood, Arkansas. This young lady is like, she's got next, and was CUSA all freshman team, started all 33 games at point guard as a true freshman.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That
and in a
hard to do.
50-year history, of the program, she played the most minutes of any freshman in program history, 1,052 minutes. And is just tough as nails, and love her game. And I'm very excited about watching her career blossom here. In our conference tournament game, we beat Jacksonville State. Young lady went 10 of 10 from the free throw line, had to handle pressure, getting double teamed, all this and that. Just showed the poise of like a wily veteran. And I'm very, very excited about watching her growth continue. So I think it'd been a minute since I'd shouted out somebody from Tech. That's probably not true. I probably did it last week. I don't remember. But I'm gonna go with the Gianna Morris episode.
All right. I love it. And shout out Gianna Morris. It was fun to watch her play this year from afar. And I'm sure being in person was even more fun.
Yep.
So bright future ahead for Gianna, the point guard. We love it. My athlete, as I am a Las Vegas Aces fan, the face of the league, number 22, A'ja Wilson. I mean, come on, dude. Like, incredible player. You know what's amazing is that none of the WNBA teams wanted to play the Aces in preseason, so they got to play the Puerto Rican national team. You know that? So that's the A'ja Wilson effect right there. But yeah, most famous number 22 in women's basketball. That's all I have to say about that. That's no shade to Caitlin Clark. She's famous. She's an exciting player to watch too, but my heart is with my Las Vegas Aces. Glad Kate Martin made the team. That's super exciting too. But let's dedicate this one to Asia Wilson. Um, and the best is yet to come from Asia Wilson. I think another year with Becky Hammond, another year in that system, the confidence, playing with the continuity with the aces, going to be real hard to beat this year, man. Real hard to beat. I can't wait to watch them play. The regular season starts 6 days from today. Today is Wednesday, May 8th. So 6 days from today, the WNBA season tips off. So we'll get to watch number 22, Asia Wilson, pretty much every other night for the next few months, which is super exciting. Um, we decided to do something a little bit different today. Instead of a would you rather, and perhaps this like turns into a little bit of a would you rather, but like not really. Um, we sort of posed the question, and coaches, feel free to play along at home. We'd love to know what you think about this specifically. What rule would you like to change in a sport or adopt from one sport to the other to make a better product? And Kyle, I'll throw it to you to go first, because you had a couple interesting ideas, and I'd love to hear what they are.
Yeah. So obviously, big basketball guy, right? No shock there. And getting to be around the sport of soccer the last couple of years at the collegiate level, and now getting to be the sport admin for women's soccer. I've kind of fallen more in love with that game, in the last 5 years or so, 5 to 10 years, I would say. Because I love the carryover in terms of invasion sports and spacing, and like I'm a big hockey fan and that kind of thing. And when, soccer, the beautiful game, when it's played well, I think it's awesome. But it's so hard to wait for like the moment where like something happens. And I'm not a fan of like 0-0. I want to see something. And I think soccer would be so much more entertaining and take off if they would just simply get rid of offsides. Allow me some snowbirding. Don't penalize the faster athlete, all of that. Like imagine basketball without a transition game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, yes, you could snowbird. It's a big goal. I get that kind of, but you're also sacrificing something if you lose a player on the defensive end. So I think I don't know if you would say adopt a rule, but like give me basketball's transition game implemented into soccer. I would love to watch soccer being like 5-3, 7-6. And hockey changed a couple of rules a couple of years ago, and now instead of that being 1-0, 2-1, you're getting a lot of like 5-4, 6-4 games in hockey. And everybody loves offense, right? Like you want to see the payoff. So that's where I would go first. That's where my mind takes me first, is open up the scoring a little bit and take the beautiful game and make it a little bit perhaps more entertaining.
I don't disagree with that. Right. I've gotten into a number of arguments about like the 0-0 pitchers duel in baseball, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
freaking boring, man.
Yeah, I don't really want to watch like a 3-0 Big Ten football game.
Yeah, like that's boring, right? It's not only is it boring, but it's like constant anticipation of nothing happening.
Mm.
Um, and like I think soccer is one of those games too where like when it's played, like you said, when it's played the right way, and it's like there is the passing and the ball movement and the people movement and the space and all of that stuff, like you can learn to appreciate that, but you also can then learn to appreciate the crowd erupting when somebody just screams one into the back of the net.
Yep.
And like maybe that's part of why the crowd erupts so feverishly, is because it doesn't happen as often. But I think in a 90-minute game, if there are 5 or 6 goals, that's still not happening as often as like in basketball, where right
Yeah, you're
now
scoring every
the
other
game is
time down the
118,
floor.
113, right?
Yeah.
Like,
People still cheer.
yeah, they
The
cheer
Knicks are
really
about to have
loud when shots
120
go in.
points. The Knicks
Um,
fans have cheered for all 118 points tonight. It's
abs
not like
Without a doubt, without a
no,
doubt. Yeah,
nobody's
no, I
booed at one of their baskets. Like,
um Yeah, no, so I agree with you on that. That'd be kind of cool to see. Mine was related to subbing in basketball specifically, but I would love to see basketball adopt the way that lacrosse and hockey sub. Um, I think it like add would add a cool element to the game, and maybe it's not for the entire game, but let's say like let's take a typical high school game for example. So you have 4 8-minute quarters. So the middle 4 minutes of each quarter are free sub. You can do whatever you want. Run kids on and off. You can have, you can do offense, defense pretty much as you want, provided kids are off at a certain point and then
Mm,
kids get on at a certain point. Um, I don't know if it would make the game better necessarily, but I certainly think it'd make it more fun to watch, especially as like you now can sort of have a specialist, or you're like,
yeah.
if you have a really fast kid, that kid's ready to go at half court and you get the rebound and like as soon as some kid runs off, that kid is taking off, and we've removed the offsides rule from soccer, so it's the same thing, right? Launch that shit up there,
They go.
right? Like I think it just like puts even more of a an emphasis on transition defense. It puts more of an emphasis on just transition as a whole. It allows the kids to be the ones doing what needs to be done.
This is
Right?
late night essential coaching conversation. So you got my mind spinning and I'm tired. I had like 9 meetings today. So I don't know if this is going to make any sense. But would that stop some of the we need a shot clock conversation?
Yeah, because it would force teams to get back. And
Like you
like
would be able to score, you would be incentivized to score quicker,
you'd be
no?
incentivized to score quickly and get kids on and off the floor quickly. Yeah.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do for the game of basketball. We're going to adopt the Elam ending and we're going to free sub.
In the middle 4 minutes of every quarter.
Boom. You're welcome.
And let's add to this. All right. So FIBA, I think EuroLeague might have tried this. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure Brian will correct me because I don't know the exact league that. Oh shit. Okay, Dante DiVincenzo. Um, See, they cheered, right? There's
Yeah,
124th point
124
of the
points. They
year
cheered.
or of the game,
Yep.
and they went nuts.
Scoring
Uh,
has not gotten old.
Scoring has not gotten old in this game. So anyway, the whole like you don't have to give the ball to the official after it goes out of bounds. You can just grab it and inbound it. Who was it that did that? Was that like Spain? Spain's top league or something did that. That would that'd be awesome too.
That I would be all for.
So I say that because I think this is a nice segue into our topic for today. Um, do adults get in the way? And how do we remove them getting in the way and allow kids to have a great experience because they are allowed to figure it out and they have to show some grit and resilience and, you know, learn through discovery and self organize and all of those things that made childhood beautiful and hard and you learned. I really think some of these rule changes we're talking about would actually help that happen.
But it would remove, well, theoretically, you hope it would remove some of the adult interference in making decisions, right? And
Hmm?
I think you can argue. I think you can argue that adults have never been more. How do I need to say this? They've never been more involved. They've never been more central to the action, and they've never been more like self-important, right? Like in most things, in a child's education, in sport, in all of these areas where you're making decisions. I think you could argue that the adult has never mattered more, at least in terms of their own self-importance. And I know we've discussed some of this before, about the importance of play and learning through discovery and grit and perseverance and screwing up and making decisions. And all those kinds of things. But like as a whole, kids don't get an opportunity to do that very much. And even today, like Kendall ran in the Cougar Mile.
Oh, that was today?
It was today. She ran, her little 8-year-old girl, the whole school. It's one of the coolest things that the school does. I've been doing it for like 30 plus years. Whole school comes out, cheers on the kids. They've got a record book. I mean, it's a really neat, really cool deal. And you've got, 5-year-olds sprinting for like 100 meters and then they're gassed and they got to run a mile. It's real cute. But a lot of that is like, hey, the kids are out there on the track. They kind of got to do it. But it's also amazing to see like how many parents can't help but like interject themselves in the kid running the mile. And like, I tried to be very intentional. I went and saw Kendall before. Hey, baby, love you, proud of you. Do what you can, go do the best you can. Give her a hug. And then it's like, hey, you go run your mile and I'll talk to you at the end. I'll be over here cheering you on and supporting you and whatnot. But, um, she ran a 9 minute and 12-second mile and was kind of in the middle of the pack and was just above average, right where you right where you want her to be, and um, but she did it. She ran her race. She ran her mile. And she knocked like a minute off her time from where she was when they started practicing or whatever. And it was just neat to see like her accomplish something on her own. She wanted the little gold presidential medal, and you got to reach a certain time to get that. And she got there. And it was cool seeing her do that, even though she was nervous about it and didn't really want to do it. But she did it. And it had nothing to do with me, had nothing to do with her mama. It was all about her doing it. It was like very intentional about removing ourselves from her experience. We were there to support her experience. And I think it's interesting when you say something like, the adults don't matter, especially in a world where like, again, I think you could argue that they've never mattered more, at least from their own point of view, because they've never been more involved. And you said something earlier in the pre-show about like when we were kids, like um, you know, be seen, not heard. Like when you think about when you would go to your parents' friend's house or friends would come over, or you'd go out to a restaurant or you go to JC Penney's, and you need to they need to know where you are, but don't you get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that was like, all right, that means that you as the kid, A, had to make choices to not get in the way, but you also had to kind of figure out how to self entertain. And you had to kind of just figure some things out on your own. And I guess we can go ahead and preface this and apologize if it turns into a little bit of the get off my lawn, yelling at clouds type of thing. But I do think that we are at a point in society and life and whatever where the adults are mattering more and more and more, which mean ultimately what that means is that the kids are mattering less and less and less. And you look at like travel ball experiences and education and this and that. And if you're in education or anything, you know exactly what we're talking about. And it's trickling up. That youth travel ball that has been an issue for the last 10 to 15 years, those kids, those parents, that has now gotten into upper varsity, college, even into kids moving into the workforce. And there's less and less independence from them. And I think this is an interesting conversation because it's like, why did we get to that point and should it have ever gotten to that point? Whereas kids have been pretty resilient and self sustaining, and, yeah, they need to be able to eat and you need to feed them and that kind of stuff. But even just thinking about playing pickup ball, we never needed an adult to tell us how to play pickup. We never needed an adult to umpire a backyard baseball game. Sure, people were going to argue. Sure, there were going to be fights. Sure, there was going to be a little blood, some crying, some this and that. But there were also a lot of lessons and ability to figure certain things out and handle that on your own. And I think you can argue that there's a ton of value in that. And that's what most of our kids nowadays are not getting.
I think we just end the episode right there, right? Like, and it is a little bit of tongue in cheek, right? I think I don't want anybody to think that we are anti-adult. Like we are adults, right? And we're coaches, we're administrators. Like,
Yeah, and
of
lots of
course,
really
we.
good adults out there that care for kids who are
Yeah,
trying to do what's best for them. Like, obviously.
I think the point that you made about adults feeling like they need to have an outsized influence in order to make sure that kids have a good experience is perhaps like the biggest oxymoron there is. And we talked about this a little bit in the past, but I want to make something very, very clear. When you and I first started our careers, the topic du jour was bulldozer parents. Or sorry, not bulldozer parents, helicopter parents.
Helicopter. Yep. Yep.
Helicopter parents. And then roundabout like a couple years into our careers, right? It turned from helicopters into bulldozers. Now, especially post COVID, those bulldozer parents have turned into architect parents. And what I have found at being at different levels of sport, different levels of education, whether it's college, high school, prep school, on the road, recruiting, all of these things, I don't believe, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, coaches, our DMs are open. You know how to get in touch with us. I'm not sure how many kids enjoy the game the way we used to when we were kids. And I think that that enjoyment factor has gone down, and it has a direct correlation to the involvement of adults where they don't need to be involved as much as they are. And you mentioned pickup. And I'm really glad that you did, because a lot of folks will say, well, kids play too many games. I was just having this conversation the other day with Ed Silva, who's a listener to the pod, in a group chat with a couple other guys, Tommy Verdell and Adam Hutchinson. And the point was made that when you went to the park or you went to the gym or the Y or whatever to go play pickup, you might have played 7, 8, 9, 10 games a day. And granted, they were shorter, right? You might have played to 11, 15, 21, whatever, out on the concrete. You know what I mean? You played a lot. And you did that perhaps every day in the summer. The difference is, and here's where the exhaustion part comes in. The difference is now kids are playing games that are adult centric, and they're playing too many of them with officials and coaches and college coaches watching them and parents in the stands. Every single time that kids play, it's for something. And it's usually something that is being not given out, but something that is representative of an adult decision that was made. Whether that's the prize at the end of the tournament, whether that's a scholarship offer, whether that is approval on the car ride home, not getting yelled at, getting dinner that night, getting treated a certain way, right? All we can go down multitudes of paths right there. It's not the number of games, it's the adult influence on the games that they're playing. And I'll take it a step further. The most fun a lot of our teams, yours and mine, Kyle, as coaches, the most fun that a lot of our kids had was when we just simply opened the gym and let them play pickup. Or when they were playing playmakers, when they were playing 3-on-3 and just hooping. Nary a college coach in sight. No adults allowed to coach them. Right. So I think that there's a number of paths we can go down here. Um, but simply put, like I truly believe that we as adults have done kids a disservice. And I'm speaking mostly about parentally, but even as coaches, we have done kids a disservice by removing personal responsibility for self organization and learning through discovery because they have tried to architect every single experience to make sure it's quote unquote positive and reaffirming.
It's it's probably the thing I miss most about being in a classroom. There's not much I miss about being in the classroom, I'll be honest. But I miss the chaos of the classroom, like intentional chaos. Hey guys, you guys have to build a roller coaster today. Figure it out. Well, how do I build a roller coaster? I don't know. Figure it out. Well, how tall should it be? I don't know. Try one. If it sucks, try something else. If you try something else and it gets a little better, try that again. I don't care. I don't really care.
Figure it out.
Figure it out. Like, and that was one of my favorite things I would try to say in class all the time. Like, I don't know. I don't care. Try something. Just try. Well, what if it's that? I don't know. I don't care. Try it. And there's
And
so much.
even if it is, who cares?
If it falls down, okay, well, then why did it fall down? Well, okay, well, now we learned something because there's too much being told and directed. And I think it comes down to, again, something else that we sort of alluded to, and maybe this gets us into something down the road with a topic on choices, but like being able to make a choice is empowering. Being able to make a decision is fun. Getting some control over what you get to do and say and feel and this and that, like that's what is truly empowering about life. Having some autonomy and freedom and independence to what you get to do. I mean, think about your own job right now with what you get to do. What are the things that you enjoy about your job and what are the things that aggravate you the most about your job? It's likely going to be the areas where you get to dictate and have some control versus you don't. And that's the thing that I've talked about this with teaching. I love teaching. I hated education. I hated being stuck to a bell schedule. Now I'm stuck to a schedule in my job now. Don't get me wrong, but there is so much more ability to choose what I do during my day. Do I want to go have lunch? Do I want to go get a cup of coffee? Do I want to ride around for 10 minutes? Do I want to go meet with somebody? Like there's so much more freedom in that and power in that. And then with choices, like you need reps at making choices because you're going to screw a lot of them up. And you need to be able to reflect on that and learn from that. And if you're not getting on the whole, you're not getting the opportunity to make choices and see what the consequences of those are, then you have no control over what it is you're doing. And then you don't ever really grow because you're expecting somebody else to do it for you. So then when we complain about this generation or these kids or whatever, like it's not their fault. They're not being given the opportunity to decide what it is they want to do. And I'm not saying that kids should, choose to play with matches in the house or anything like that. Like, or eat ice cream every night for dinner. Like obviously there needs to be some safety and some guidelines and this and that. But today, like walking in the gym after meeting number 9 of the day, watching our guys play pickup with their coaches, and our AD even like said this, like there was a ball goes off of somebody, everybody in the gym starts complaining. Somebody makes a call. Nope, the other team doesn't agree with the call. They all start arguing with each other. We all know the scene, and everybody kind of gets after it. And eventually, somebody's like, just whatever, like check it out. All right, shoot for it. Just shoot for it. If you can't, all right, just somebody shoot for it. All right, do die, whatever. And our AD was like, see, this is why I don't think like you need officials all the time, who's the official? They're the adult in the room. You don't necessarily need somebody to make every decision for the people that are playing because the people that are playing eventually will figure it out. Now, yeah, it might come with some arguing. Maybe somebody gets pushed, shoved, something like that. Somebody gets pissed at somebody else. But eventually, what does everybody in the gym want to do? They want to play. And eventually they're going to want to get back to playing. So we either figure it out, we make up a rule, somebody says fine, whatever. And eventually you end up moving on, and you didn't need an adult to step in and figure out how that was going to happen. And I thought that was like a real timely example because that's exactly what they did. They argued, they argued, they argued, and eventually it went on a little long. And somebody was like, fine, whatever, shoot for it. You make it your ball. If you don't, whatever. And so I think, like, going back to our, not our would you rather, but like how we led this off, forget challenges in basketball. Just, all right, fine. I don't agree with the call. All right, go shoot for it. Shoot a three. You make it your ball, not your ball, whatever, and move on. We don't have to spend 2.5 minutes watching a slow mo replay on some iPad tablet somewhere. Just check it up and move on, and but at the end of the day, I think this conversation comes down to reps. Reps and making choices, reps and being able to have a little ownership and control of what it is in your destiny. And then knowing the fact that you're going to screw up a lot of the decisions that you make. And we got to be okay with that. Sometimes again, I go back to Kendall, like having to read every night. There are nights where she just don't have it. We don't need to read. But there are some nights where she doesn't want to read or she doesn't want to do homework. It's like, all right, you're going to have to do that in the morning. And then we wake up in the morning. Mornings are a little bit more stressful. We're going to be a little late, this or that. But it comes back to the choice you made last night. You have to live with that. If you wanted to get to school a little early because that's the fun time of the day and we didn't get there because you had to do your homework, that's a consequence of not doing your homework the night before. And should she have done her homework the night before? Yes, probably so. Could I have made her? Absolutely. But was that a low risk situation for her to make a choice and learn something about consequences? I think so. So is it worth that rep? I think so. So if you're not intentionally building those things in, there's just not a lot of opportunity for kids to get to do that. Because if you really were to audit your day to day or your kid's day to day or a player's day to day, how many choices do they actually get to make in a day? It's not very many.
I think so. Here's where I'm going to differ on that opinion a little bit. I think when we're thinking about choices, it's not so much like the big choices of like, do I want to do my homework tonight or tomorrow morning? And then I have to live with the consequence of that. It's the little choices of like, do I respond to this text or Snapchat right now or do I do it later? Are people going to be upset with me if I do? So there's all these like intrusive thoughts that happen because there's now assigned a consequence to each choice in the immediate, right? So it's like I need to sort of put myself on autopilot just to get through the day. And I'm so fatigued by all these choices that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things that it's very hard for me to make that choice because I don't have the reps in doing it. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but like the way that I look at it, so I take your pickup example, right? How did we settle when there was a jump ball on the playground? We said first. I don't know if you did,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what we did first.
Mm-hmm.
I said it first. It's mine, right? Eliminates the need for an official, eliminates the need for anybody to intervene. That's just how it goes. And so I do think that adults have overcomplicated those sort of natural decision making processes where if you left kids to their own devices, not like a Lord of the Flies situation, but if you,
Correct.
right, within some sort of parameters, if you left them to their own devices, 9 times out of 10, the kids are probably going to come up with a better solution than you could have. So, what's your role in their process? It's creating the environment for them.
Mm-hmm.
But because there's been a conditioning to believe that they need the answer from you, or that if you don't give them the answer right away, or if there's even a little bit of struggle, they can turn to someone and say, hey, what do I do right now? That's the rep that they really need. Because they are making decisions. They're making a lot of decisions. They're probably making too many decisions. about stuff that is inconsequential. But in the context of the sport, in the context of education, in the context of problems that are hard to solve, whether it's a math problem, whether it's writing multiple sentences and spelling everything correctly for whatever it is, or it's how do I fix my jumper? Who do I pass the ball to on this particular possession? What is my playing time? When do I need to go talk to my coach? Like those decisions that have like quote unquote consequences, whether it's a grade, whether it's playing time, whether it is the role on the team, all of that stuff. I think those decisions have largely been removed. Those choices have largely been removed because we have offered as adults so many crutches, so many things that we have built as quote unquote supports that our kids don't need that level of support. They need to just be encouraged to figure it out. Here are the tools. Our first level of support is actually challenging you. Like that's what I believe. I believe that us providing adequate challenge to kids is actually a form of support for them.
Was is there a difference between support and being supportive?
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
I'm supporting you by basically doing it for you
Mm-hmm.
and removing the challenge or the choice or whatever. But I can also be supportive by watching you fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think about it in a professional capacity, right? And this is something that at some point we'll tell the story of what happened at Worcester Academy. And we invite coaches to share their stories of what support has looked like versus what it hasn't looked like from an administrative perspective, right? What do you think teachers would say? What's the number one thing teachers want? They want support. They want to know that they are supported. I think in an adult to adult context, support looks very different than it does in an adult to child context, right? Adult to adult, if we are both operating with a level of intelligence and a level of ability that is like I am not, you as the administrator are not teaching me anything. You're not teaching me how to do my job, right? Like you're not here to adequately challenge me to complete a task or like to you know what I mean? But as the coach to the player or the teacher to the student, our job is to provide the environment in which they can fail and be supported during that failure. And that level of support varies by student, but it's not, okay, let me just do it for you, or, oh, just guess the answer 3 times on this, and then it'll give it to you and you can move on, right? That little fail safe that's built into all the online math programs and all that stuff. Our job in supporting a student or a player as an adult, it might just be what you said earlier. I don't know. Try again. It's okay to fail here. It's okay to get it wrong, to get it right here. It's okay to use more materials to try to figure this out. Because once you have then figured it out, you've learned it for permanence, not for memorization or not for the test. And that's something I always used to tell my teams. Like, we're not practicing for our game tomorrow against Woodson or against Dexter Southfield or against, NYU. We're not practicing for that one specific thing. We are practicing to get better at what we do and what we have deemed to be important. If that helps us win, great. If it doesn't, let's test the theory then. Why didn't it help us? And so what I think then the alternative to that is what you're talking about is like kids feeling supported. I think in their mind, because we have not set those boundaries or parameters properly as adults, they think that being supported is no matter what I do, I'm never wrong.
Right.
How could I possibly be wrong? how could there possibly be a better way than the way I did this? And I failed colossally, and that's not my fault. That's your fault because you didn't support me enough through that.
Or it's somebody else's fault that it didn't go my way.
Right.
And
Right.
then we uphold that thought by saying, yeah, you're right. It was the teacher's picking on you, or the coach is
Mm-hmm.
playing favorites, or
Mm-hmm.
that kid, gets whatever they want or whatever, instead of kind of life is not fair kind of thing. Or and we get into this grit perseverance conversation. And then there's sometimes life doesn't work out. Like, and and I say that sometimes life doesn't work out, but it eventually does. It just may
Mm-hmm.
not work out the way you thought it should, or it doesn't work out when you thought it should. Like there have been moments in our careers, even as adults, where our career has not worked out, but that not working out was a part of a bigger plan,
Mm-hmm.
was a part of a bigger journey to where it eventually did work out. But we had to go through some shit to get there. And
Yeah.
then there'll be moments where it's like, wow, this really feels like it is working out. And it's usually never as good as you think it is,
Right.
and that's preparing you for the next thing. And how you handled the valley will determine whether or not you get to go to another peak. But if you can't handle the peak, you're going to end up right back down in the valley. But again, we are having to constantly reflect and talk about this stuff as quote unquote grown adjusted adults, and you're still struggling with it. We still struggle with it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But your kid struggles with it, and you just want to jump in and be like, okay, no, I don't want to watch you struggle.
So let me ask you this to that point. All right. And this is just something I wrote down that popped into my head. Do we think that right now, as adults, and I don't blame kids for anything, right? They're kids. They're not fully functioning adults. They haven't had a life experience, all of those things. I don't blame kids for this. Have adults created, and this isn't for every kid because there's a lot of kids out there, there's a lot of parents out there, a lot of coaches, administrators who do things as best they can. And they are the people that I hold near and dear who say, like, no, it is their journey. We are here to guide them, but we are not going to do it for them. Right. So I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the folks that have created an entitlement to the kids to always, quote, feel, unquote, right. That no matter what choice they make, they want their kid to feel like they were right. And they're entitled to feel like they were right, regardless of the facts of the situation.
Well, okay. You mentioned the word entitled. Could we argue this is the most entitled generation, world, moment in time that we've ever had?
It's hard for me to say because I wasn't around for all the other generations, right? So I
Right.
don't know. I mean,
But every other generation in the past feels like the next generation is the most entitled, right?
let me say this. So I was actually having a conversation with one of my former players who's my one of my favorite kids ever. And here's something that happened to me for the first time. So we are on the elder side of being millennials, right? You and I. There's a generation between us and Gen Z. There's like several generations between us, I think. I don't think it's like a hard and fast thing that's like millennials then Gen Z. For the first time, I have in this conversation, this kid told me that she could recognize the generation gap between her and her teammates, and she was a junior and her teammates were freshmen. And that was the first time that that has ever happened in my lifetime, that it's been that quick to be able to be recognized. That they walked in not understanding at all anything to do with like personal responsibility. They always felt like they were right. They felt like they were being picked on. They were quick to judge, all of these things. And again, it's not a hard and fast rule. Not every kid is like that. Not every adult is like
Right.
that. Nobody's painting with a broad brush here. But I think a lot of these behaviors are caused by overactive adults disallowing their kids to be wrong. And that's what creates that entitlement to always feel like you are being wronged. And thus, you may feel as if, like, and again, I'm using the word feel a lot, right? We talked about this last time. There may be a feeling that for whatever reason, people are against them, the coach hates them, they could never do anything right. Like all of these things are things that have been said. But in reality, our job as adults is to provide that adequate challenge and to provide the opportunity to fail in an insular environment so that when you go out into the real world where there is no more safety net, you can make educated choices about what you're trying to do with your life so you don't end up living at home with me for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's where, like, and just hearing her talk about it, I was like, man, we are feeling like we are dealing with the exact same thing on our roster here. It's the same thing that like everybody, coaches that we talk to deal with on a daily basis. But kids don't become that way, or young people don't become that way unless they are influenced to that. And who are their primary influences? It's going to be the adults around them, and then whatever they're seeing on their phone. Like, I don't know if that answers the question or not, but I really like that thought about the entitlement to always being right or always getting the benefit of the doubt, like without the Raka process going on. I think that's the other part, right? Is like, what questions are adults asking kids to help them reflect on what they are perceiving? Because that's what I believe the role of the adult is now, or should be now. It is not to give them information. It is not to change their mind. It is not to like proselytize to them and say, this is what you have to do. It is to take them down the pathway of reflection, awareness, clarity, and alignment and teaching through questioning and helping them come to their own realizations and being a critical consumer of the information that they're receiving through a fire hose every single day, every single second of every single day. That's my thought.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point earlier when talking about the choices. Like they are making choices, but we're not making meaningful choices. They're hitting the bullseye of the wrong target. They're
Yeah.
choosing whether or
Yeah.
not to reply to this Snapchat or to open this up or not do that or whatever. And but it's the ability of the meaningful reps, I think, and the entitlement that they don't have to do that, or the entitlement that whatever that we are feeling is supposed to be validated by somebody just because of the fact that you felt something. Um, the 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 entitlement that just because I'm in the room, that means that you have to care that I'm in the room. And again, like life doesn't necessarily work itself out that way sometimes. And I do think, I mean, you've heard every generation before you, is like, well, we had it tougher, but every generation then says the role of our generation is to make things better for the next generation. And then we resent the fact that we had it harder. you know, I I didn't get this, or I mean, and we're hearing it now, like even in like collegiate athletics with NIL, like a lot of a lot of former athletes don't like NIL because they didn't get NIL. They didn't get the ability to do that. But I think if you live in that space, especially like we do now, like you have to view that as like, well, just because my parents didn't have a car growing up doesn't mean that they didn't want me to have a car growing up, right? Like you're still working for a better future, but it's the irony that we do a good job sort of providing that, and then we resent the fact that we did a good job giving them what we said we were going to give them. And I think you could sit here and argue, okay, well, what does a quote unquote, better future look like? And I think what ultimately happens by do the adults matter or not is the better future ends up being an easier one,
Mm,
a more architected, if that's a word, path for you. And it's not so much the quality of it, it's the ease of it and what you didn't have to do to earn it. And yes, I think adults matter, but I think where they matters more. And what has ultimately happened, maybe this is just another, bullseye wrong target conversation, that we are showing up and mattering in all the wrong places. We are influencing in all the wrong places. We are getting in the way in all the wrong places. And even throwing this back to an AAU or a travel ball or whatever conversation, like kids did not create AAU.
nope.
Kids did not create 8 and under softball World Series tournaments.
Nope.
Kids are not charging $50 a car to park at a recruiting event.
Nope.
Kids didn't put together a 500-page booklet of other kids going to pay to play in said AAU event. Like
Nope.
the adults did all of those things.
Sure did.
And then we hate on the kid for how they act and respond due to the environment that the adults set up. So, do adults matter? Sure. But do they matter in all of the wrong places? Then I would say no. And I think it's comes back to sort of the reprioritization of what ultimately matters. And again, everybody's going to have their own opinion on, I guess, what matters and what doesn't matter. And then you end up getting sort of territorial and what matters. Well, my kid matters more than your kid. So I've got to make sure that my kid is set up. Your kid can go over there and screw up. I got to make sure that mine gets ahead. And then at the end of the day, what you've talked about for a dozen other episodes, why did my kid have to get ahead? Is it because I really wanted my kid to get ahead, or is it because I wanted to win the Christmas party? And it's there's so much um self-worth and social capital for the adult, which is determined by how well their kid is doing.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and therefore, even if your kid is successful, it's not about your kid being successful. It's about you being a successful parent. So perhaps more bullseye wrong target.
So let's go back to something you said at the very beginning of that, because I think it is exactly how you ended it. You were talking about making it easier, right? Like every generation wants to make it better, make it easier for the next one, so on and so forth. So, two things. Number one, when we're talking about the relationship between kids and adults, and it's been, manufactured, architectured, whatever you want to call it, is that actually making it easier in the long term? Because we've talked about unlearning too, and how much unlearning has to happen. Is it fair to say that because of all of this marionetting that happens, they're actually making it harder for them when they become adults? But in the short term, I don't want to see my kid feeling any pain or disappointment or anything. So we're going to try to ease that out as much as possible. And then the second part Is the adult's validation their attempt to make it easier on themselves as an adult? So like things weren't easy for them growing up, quote unquote. We can all say that, right? Every kid will be able to say that when they're older. Things weren't easy for me, this, that, and the other. Blame, whatever. Is the parent seeking that validation by winning the Christmas party because their kid is achieving the best, even though it is like literally been proven that the outcomes can be very much the same for everyone, and we can get people to where they need to be without stepping on other people? Is that validation their version of saying, see, we've reached the promised land? This is what my parents fought so hard for. I'm not going to let my kid fail. And thus, I've done a really good job.
I think that's fair for that's probably, again, broad strokes generalizing, that's probably the case. And obviously I don't think anybody's going into any situation trying to screw up or, do anything detrimental for anybody or anything like that. And um I think you can maybe get into to somewhat of a perpetual generational cycle where it's like, okay, I want to make sure I'm doing a good job as a coach, as a teacher, as a parent. And the only way that I really know in the immediate that I'm doing a good job is that if my kid feels good, or my kid feels okay, or my students feel good, or if my kids make an A on the test, that means I'm a good teacher. I might have made a really shitty test that was way too easy, but because everybody's doing well, then that means I'm doing a good job. So then I'm sort of their success. I'm validating that back on myself. And ultimately, I think what we're doing is we're telling on ourselves, because then we're showing off essentially kind of how insecure we are, perhaps, because we don't want to act like we've failed or we've screwed up, even as the adults in the room. And so if we can then architect and pave the way for them to have some perceived success, to
Hmm.
where they at least feel like they're feeling good or it seems like they're doing well, then we can then say, okay, well, I did a good job preparing them for the path, but really we are preparing the path for them. And
Mm-hmm.
some of that is not that it's not that we don't want our kids to fail, it's that we don't want to see them fail. It's not that we don't want them to struggle. We don't want to have to deal with them struggling. We don't want to have to deal with the difficult conversation about something that might have happened at school or something that might have happened to somebody else, because that's going to force us to have to get real in that moment. And that might be a little bit hard or awkward or uncomfortable or what have you. And it, again, it's challenging. I'm not saying this stuff is easy,
Mm-hmm.
but there's definitely times where Kendall will come home and ask or talk about something, and it's kind of like, oh man, like I wasn't prepared to have that conversation today. I don't really want to have that conversation right now. I didn't think I was going to have to, or I'm not ready, or whatever, or I'm tired and I don't want to get into it right now. But at the same time, like it's something that I think you've if ultimately, like you said, for in the long term, if we want them to be prepared or successful, we got to kind of live through a little bit of that. And kind of taking this back to, I guess, kind of how we all got started. I don't think it's do the adults matter or do we matter or not. I think it's in what context do we matter and to the level that which we matter, and that we are, again, we are sort of interjecting ourselves in the wrong places or spaces. And then when we're given an opportunity to maybe interject and matter in a moment where we need to, we perhaps opt out of it for whatever reason. And maybe again, it's just because it's hard to watch your students, your players, your kids struggle or fail, because I think maybe at the end of the day, we're thinking that reflects poorly on us.